In this episode, we're trying something a little bit new. We're adding a collection of short stories to talk about Julius Caesar and his debacles. Short, snapped stories all put together. Hope you enjoy.
We're going to talk about fame, sex, a little bit of drug use, and we're going to do it in a classy way by talking about history, not in a trashy way in the tabloids, because apparently the only thing that separates the two is time. We're going to talk about the love life of Gaius Julius Caesar. We're only going to talk about what he did in the bedroom, in the bathhouse, in the streets, in Gaul, in Egypt, in Algeria, in a lot of places. Before we get into that, Mike, how are you doing and what are you drinking?
Well, with that opening, I thought you were going to say we're going to be talking about Charlie Sheen or we're going to talk about Roman rules apply, but I'm drinking some Pennington whiskey and I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Oh yeah, I got some Kona Brewing Ale here, and I believe I'm going to say Caesar. I know the correct way to pronounce it is actually like Kazar. I'm not going to do that. Sorry. I know it's right. I'm not doing it. But he came to powers in the fighting in Gaul, came back as a hero and became dictator. But we're only pretty much going to talk about the fun stuff. So, there's a lot of speculation, and a lot of this people believe stemmed from political rivals because just like today, we like to make fun of people for what they do in the bedroom. So, Caesar, like most nobles, probably started having sex pretty young and started having sex with slaves.
He fucks. He definitely fucks.
Oh yeah, Caesar gets around. Over the course of his career, he's had 3 wives. There's multiple children that are just alleged. I mean, I feel like this is the discount version of
Genghis Khan?
Genghis Khan, yeah. Like, I feel like there's a surprising number of people who are related to Caesar, if I had to guess.
I wouldn't put it past him.
So, let's go through Caesar's wives, I guess, first. So, he's had 3 wives. His first wife died of...
Nick, you sure it wasn't 3 wise men? Because with the rumors of Caesar...
Yes, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So, this is part of the... I guess this would technically be placed before his wives, so we'll talk about it. And I can't really confirm this, so take this with a grain of salt. Well, so we do know that Caesar was I always mess up this word, effeminate man. So he's had more feminine tendencies than you would think the dictator of Rome would have. And the rumor is that he was really into cross-dressing when he was a child. And later on, you'll hear later in the podcast, we go into detail about how he allegedly took it from a king, I forget his name, but the king of Nicomedes, or King Nicomedes of Bithynia, and which is frowned upon. In Rome, you're only allowed to dish it out. You can have sex with men as long as you are the giver and not the receiver.
Nick is an expert in this, so I've definitely taken his advice on it.
Yes, as long as you blurt out no homo at the end, you're fine. That's where the rule came from. That's why it's no homo. It's Latin.
That's so dumb and I love it.
Thank you. Just thought of that. So his first marriage to Cornelia lasted about 20 years. It was a long time. She birthed a daughter, Julia, and then he married, after Cornelia died, he married his second wife, Pompeia, and then there was a scandal, and long story what happened was there was this ritual that only women were allowed to attend, and his wife was leading it. This guy went in there in order to seduce his wife, and then dressed as a woman. And basically Caesar said, because at this point he was the religious leader of Rome, and he said, well, my wife, as the Pontifex Maximus, I have to be above reproach, and that includes my wife. We have to be, noble Roman citizens, so I'm just going to divorce her. And then after that, he married Calpurnia. That was the last wife, and she was married to him when he was killed. Now, his legitimate children would be, like I said, his daughter Julia, and then Caesarion, who is the daughter, or is the son of Cleopatra, the famous Egyptian queen, who I think pretty much everybody knows about. And then he adopted
Mark Anthony sloppy seconds.
I think Antony was the sloppy seconds. Anthony picked up seconds.
I think that's what I just said.
Oh, okay.
Could be wrong. I'm not very good at English sometimes.
I guess I misunderstood. But he has a lot of suspected children. And of the notable suspected children, and this one I don't think is true, but Brutus, who we'll talk about later, the famous Brutus, Marcus Junius Brutus, his mother, Servilia, who Caesar has been having an affair with for like 40 years. But that meant that Caesar would have had to father. Caesar was 15 when he was born. So 14 years old is kind of early, but not out of the realm of possibility. So
especially for ancient times?
Ancient times. But they're both kind of like nobles, and it's kind of frowned upon in that culture, I guess. Like, you're not supposed to be fooling around.
I mean, Roman orgies are a thing.
But that was more of a lowerish class thing, I thought.
Couldn't tell you.
The nobles are supposed to have a little bit more character and virtue, and I think we might do a whole podcast on it later, I'm not sure, but after all the Caesar and Antony and the fighting that takes place after he was killed led to these new virtue rules to apply, basically for forbidding divorce and basically saying the faults of the past were in just because of bad characters, and people found fun ways around divorce, like, oh, well, you can't, it's like, you can't meet up. It was like, they had a rule, like, you couldn't be alone with a member of the opposite sex, like, in a house. It's like, well, then they just go have sex, like, in a bathhouse, or they'd rent a hotel, or, like, some shit like that. So they just kept finding ways around these rules to have affairs, or get out of having affairs. Or get out of going to jail for having affairs, I should say.
Talk about charisma being 100%.
Yeah. So next, he had another daughter, Junia, with Servilia again. Like I said, he's been with this woman for 40 years, so her children are mostly suspected to be Caesar's. And then he had another son, Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus, who became a Roman general and then basically investigated Caesar's death. And then of famous people that Caesar had sex with, we talked about Cleopatra and Servilia. And then he also had sex with the queen of basically modern Algeria. And I'm going to try and say it, and it's not going to be right. Mauretania is the
Mauretania?
Mauretania.
Mauretania?
I don't know.
See, the key is, Nick, when you're bad at languages, you just say it really fast, and it sounds like it's right.
But he also had a lot of fun when he went to Gaul. And let's see, basically, I'm trying to think of how to word this. Let's just say, so Caesar had to pay his military somehow, right? So when they sacked, different places with the legions, they would take gold and all sorts of stuff, including people, to use as slaves to create money to pay troops and just as the spoils of war. And from the stories of his soldiers, Caesar was a big fan of partaking, and Suetonius, who was like one of those people who, there's like a group, I'm trying to think of what we call them. Anyway, some of those the book, the stories that people wrote at the time about these people that made it to present day, like stuff Cicero wrote. But at the time, even though we know that this is what they wrote, we also know they wrote it with a slant, so we don't know how true much of this is. But he talked about all the different ways that Caesar would have sex with the, I guess you would call them slaves?
Royalty at the time? Well,
No,
slaves?
the slaves, like from Gaul.
Oh, yeah,
like,
slaves.
Where he
Slaves.
conquered. Yeah, so, and then they have, Caesar supposedly was really into fellatio, which is, into receiving, which is kind of like a frowned upon practice in Rome, I guess. Not really sure where that came from, but
Thank God it's in the past.
yeah, I guess that's as a little secret, but apparently not that secret since it was wrote about. But also Caesar had a lot of enemies, so it's hard to say what's true and isn't true because a lot of this could just be slander. But yeah, and then he would basically just like have women come into or slaves come into his tent and like sit in certain positions, and then he'd just go crazy. And then yeah, so yeah, and but Caesar spent so much money in Gaul that his soldiers had a little song. It goes, watch well your wives, we bring a blade, a bald pate master of the wrenching trade. The gold was spent on many Gaelic whores, exhausted now, thou'st come to borrow more. Basically, Caesar is going from place to place to get money to pay his soldiers because he spent all his money on whores, is what they were saying.
You know, the best people are children being honest and soldiers having free time. It leads to the most chaotic things ever.
So, we're going to get into 2 stories later on about Caesar reading a sex note in front of the Senate, and we're going to talk about Caesar having sex with the dude. So this is what passes for entertainment these days, I guess. So we are bringing it to you. I don't know. I feel like that someone should do a whole show. It's just like, it's just like E and like all that like Hollywood shit, but it's like ancient times. I don't know. There might be something there, but I just think it's interesting. And I think it's interesting how if you watch like entertainment today and like see what's going on in Hollywood, it's trashy. But if we talk about Caesar's sex life for 20 minutes, it's informational.
Just depends on how famous you are, I guess.
Yep. Well, not really. It just depends how much time has passed.
Oh.
But that's all I had before we get into it, so unless you had anything you wanted to add.
No, it's good to know that Caesar was a hound dog.
We're going to talk about one of the most gangster moments in history. In 64 BC, in the Roman Senate, Caesar and Cato were arguing over the Catiline conspiracy. Now what that is a Senator Catilina basically tried to throw a coup and take over an election, force an election, and take the consulship away from Marcus Tullius Cicero. And so they are kind of doing an investigation in the Senate about who was involved because, well, they want to know, who the main characters were. And like most coups, it's not entirely clear. And Caesar, a man of the people, was arguing that they should be lenient on the aggressors, on the people who were doing it. They should just go through the normal procedures of a trial and not do anything drastic. And this made Cato even more upset at Caesar, thinking that Caesar was involved because why would he want anyone to go easy on these guys? And this made him think that Caesar was involved in the conspiracy. And during the argument, a note was passed to Caesar.
What did the note say?
Cato thought he had a gotcha moment. He wanted to know what the note said too, Mike, because he thought it was a note from the conspiracy side and he was about to expose Caesar for being part of the conspiracy in front of the whole Senate. So Caesar began reading the note out loud. And I'm going to read you the actual excerpt that Pluto wrote. Now, since we must not pass over even the slightest tokens of character when we are delineating, as it were, a likeness of the The story goes that on this occasion, when Caesar was eagerly engaged in a great struggle with Cato and the attention of the Senate was fixed upon the two men, a little note was brought in from outside to Caesar. Cato tried to fix suspicion upon the matter and alleged that it had something to do with the conspiracy, and bade him read the writing aloud. Then Caesar handed the note to Cato, who stood near him. But when Cato had read the note, which was an unchaste letter from his sister Servilia to Caesar, with whom she was passionately and guiltily in love with, he threw it to Caesar, saying, "Take it, thou sot," and then resumed his speech. He had intercepted a dirty note from his sister to Caesar.
Yikes.
So his sister kind of got around. She this is like her second marriage, and she had a son from the previous marriage, and I guess the husband was okay that she was having an affair with Caesar.
Can you really say no at that point?
Yeah. So there is one more interesting fact. So Servilia, I just listened to a thing how to pronounce it, and I forgot, but I think it's Servilia, I think it's Servilia, I think, had a few children. One of them had a pretty familiar name that you'll recognize, Mike.
Isn't it, isn't it the one who would eventually become Caesar?
It's Brutus.
Oh, it's Brutus. Oh, well, it was kind of Caesar's son. I mean, Brutus was loved by Caesar until, read Shakespeare's play if you want to figure out what ends at that story.
Yeah, so she had an affair with Caesar for a long time. I think, was it like 2 decades, so 20 years, and it lasted, I guess, until he died. And so maybe there was more to the Brutus thing than power.
That's what I'm thinking. Stop doing my mom.
Yeah, stop sleeping with my mom. But I still think that's one of the most gangster moments in history of, hey, what does that note say? Oh, it's a note from your sister who I'm having sex with.
Big yikes. Lots of yikes. Oof.
Yep. And I looked it up. I couldn't find anything either way of whether the note was purposely planted, like Caesar tried to embarrass Cato with that fact, but I couldn't find an answer.
It's a good question. Caesar being a technician, it is a possibility, but also wouldn't be surprised if just bad luck happened.
Yep. And I apologize to all you Roman fans. I know I mispronounced Caesar, and I know I mispronounced Servilia, but I am pretty sure I got Cato right. Today we're going to learn how Caesar was able to raise an armada, and also why in Roman culture you can dish it out, but you can't take it. But before we get into that, Mike, how are you doing? What are you drinking?
Well, we're back to Rome. I feel like I should be drinking wine, but unfortunately I'm just drinking some water.
Well, in the year 80 BC, Gaius Julius Caesar was sent to Bithynia to raise, he needed a naval fleet, and his job as an appointed ambassador is to go get that fleet. So he went over to Bithynia and met King Nicomedes, and he took a little bit of time, hanging out in Bithynia, spending time with King Nicomedes. Rumors kind of started to circulate that they were engaged in sexual activities. And this is where it gets confusing if you look at the story through the eyes of someone alive today. So in Roman culture, you could have sex. Guys can have sex with guys, and girls can have sex with girls, but you don't want to be the guy who's getting fucked. You want
to be the pitcher and not the catcher.
Yeah, you want to be the pitcher and not the catcher. You can dish it out, but you can't take it, because when you're taking it, and then that implies that you are beneath that person. That's seen as a feminine act. So, give you an example, and this is I guess we should have got a disclaimer. This is not going to be a PC podcast.
When the fuck is our podcast ever PC?
It's usually not sexual, I guess. So put that warning up there now. So if a man ate a woman out, he was receiving. So he was the feminine one in that, which is why a woman could dominate a man sexually, because you think, oh, like, how could you receive This is why oral sex was not very popular in Rome, is because like you were very clearly receiving, like being the non-dominant. It's kind of hard to tell as far as I can tell. Don't quote me on this particular part. It seems like this is more of a higher level Roman society, more worried about this kind of stuff of status. But at the same time, I see a lot of quotes that mention this is more for higher levels people, but at the same time, this did like rumors spread around Rome about Caesar and this king. So it doesn't, to me, that doesn't seem like, if soldiers are talking about it, that seems like an everyday kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it has come up multiple times that Caesar got his salad tossed.
Yeah. Well, but then that he would be giving. So that's fine.
Nothing with my pun there? Oh, disappointing.
Oh, damn it. I didn't even right over my head. I'm sorry. You set me up real good and I just
Well, good thing you're not pitching, you're only catching.
Uncalled for. And so that's, and this is why in our day and age you see people are like, "Oh, Caesar was bisexual." It's like, I mean, technically yes, but that wasn't even like a consideration. Like men could have sex with men and women could have sex with women, although it was less common. But it wasn't like a taboo. Like it wasn't this thing that it is now. Like it wasn't even a thought. It wasn't categorized. So I guess if the categories we're putting up, you could say he was bisexual. But that's not looking at history through the lens of history, which is what we're trying to do here, even if it is talking about a somewhat hilarious subject.
I just love how too there's always a moment of doubt in my mind because like the soldiers are saying it. I'm like, soldiers say a lot of messed up things. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they're just like talking the shit.
Oh yeah. So Caesar went and must have performed well, as they say, because he got his fleet. But it was, I feel like this is a scarring moment in his life because he was pissed about this because a lot of rumors started to spread that he received from King Nicomedes. And he got a lot of different titles that came out of this. One was the Queen of Bithynia, which is where Nicomedes is the king of Bithynia, making him the mistress. So that came up a lot during his career. Another little song people would sing is Caesar laid the Gauls low and Nicomedes laid Caesar low.
Damn, that's good. That's clever.
And let's see. So they called him the bald adulterer and every woman's man and every man's woman.
They were savages.
Yeah, and this comes down to, so every woman's man basically because Caesar had sex with most of his political rivals' wives. Like he was just out there
slaying dick,
banging everybody. Yeah, laying aqueduct, if you will.
Well, I guess he got all those rivers wet. Definitely. Okay, I'll stop. There's just too many puns.
All right. But yeah, all the jokes on Caesar and stuff really pissed him off, and I think that's what spurned him to just go out and have sex with everyone's wives. And obviously Caesar denied it, and but that kind of like it always does made it worse. And but yeah, and so he at one point would pay people to sing opposing songs about him to, I don't know, like offset, like he's buying some good press, I guess. You're trying to take up some space no one else is. He's basically just trying to get rid of that. Now, in the first time I had heard this story, is that this wasn't true, as far as I can tell, is that Caesar got so pissed he went back and killed Nicomedes. But I have not been able to find that. I thought that would have been a more hilarious ending to the story. Yeah, so it's kind of a shame. But to finish it off, in 74 BC, when King Nicomedes was finishing his term, he basically gave his kingdom to be a part of Rome, and the Roman Senate brought him into Rome as a new province. And the people, Mithridates, wanted the kingdom, and it started a whole another war. So,
as one naturally does.
Yes. And yeah, so that's a story of how you can, in Rome you can dish it out and you can't take it. story of how to raise an army, and some things stick with you, I guess. And it's I just think that's like we've advanced so far as a society from the days of ancient Rome.
Have we though?
But it's still fun. It's still funny to make fun of someone for getting it in the butt. And there's something comforting about that fact.
I just really hope those songs still exist somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure you could find them. Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah, I didn't look for them at all, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. Well, that's all I had, Mike. Thanks for listening to the Backyard Philosophy Podcast. We rarely finish a podcast without missing a point we wanted to bring up, so let us know what we forgot. And if you have a topic you want us to talk about, let us know at Backyard Philosophy on Instagram and Backyard Philosophy Podcast on Facebook.